Hey, welcome to Mike Simpson wood carving. Today we're going to be carving a Raggedy Andy Christmas ornament. It's a perfect mate to the Raggedy Ann Christmas ornament that'll be the next video coming out. Okay, so here's the Raggedy Andy Christmas ornament that we'll be doing today. Of course, it's painted and finished, but that's what they'll look like when they're finished. I've got a stack here of cutouts that I need to make. Those will all be cut out on a jigsaw, just basically outlined with a template. And then you end up with a blank that looks like Raggedy Andy. And I'll be using a knife, about a 20 millimeter number 3 dish, a small V tool, and then about a 5 millimeter number 8 sweep. So that's it. So first thing up is have all these lines drawn on the Andy that detail out the character of Andy. And with a V tool or a parting tool, I'm just following those lines which define in 3 dimension those lines which are the features of the Andy Christmas ornament. I've been asked where I learned to carve, and I had done carving prior to, but honestly, I learned wood carving while I was working at Silver Dollar City as a young man in the early 70s. It was a great place to have worked and spend summers, and then of course it was a real privilege to get to be there during that era when it was owned by Peter Engler. And Peter's probably the most influential person in modern day wood carving. Peter's passed away now, but he started many a wood carver from not being able to carve. He would buy carvings and ensure that you had the tools and the wood and the opportunity to do wood carving if you were interested. And I was fortunate enough to work around some of the carving greats, work side by folks like Bob Robertson and, of course, J.R. McNeil. So there we have the Andy, and now we're going to go around all the outer edges and just round him off so that he's more of a 3-dimensional character instead of being more 2-dimensional. Some of the other carvers that worked during that time was he was a young fellow at the time named Mike Croney. He was a great artist. Trying to think, there was a fellow from Kansas who I think he was a college teacher. His name was Dean Troutman. I believe Dean still, he may actually have some wood carving videos out there. If he does, feel free to Google him there and maybe pick up some tips from him. He used to do some really good flat work, like some really neat relief carving. There was a fellow by the name of Garvin McCutcheon who also did relief carving. He was noted especially for he did these praying hands in black walnut. Gosh, they were really beautiful. Some of the folks that worked there prior to me working there were Harold Enlow. Harold had worked there years before I did, and Harold had since left Ozark Mountain Wood Carving there in Silver Dollar City, and he had moved to Arkansas. He and his wife and Elaine, and they started a wood carving shop there in Dogpatch, USA, which was a theme park there in Arkansas, near where they lived in Harrison, or near Harrison, Arkansas. I never actually met Junior Cobb, but Junior used to work, did some carvings for the shop. He didn't work at the shop very often. Another fellow who sold to the store was Ivan Denton. He actually did some really nice Western art. And I remember we had a full-sized Arabian horse that Ivan had carved in the wood carving shop there for years and years. Another fellow who had worked in the shop and had gone out on his own was a fellow by the name of Jim Maxwell. And in the 70s, he had a wood carving shop there in Branson on the Strip, which I don't think is open any longer. And another fellow, Steve Butler, he did some great caricatures. I remember for years while I worked at the wood carving shop, in the foyer there was probably an 8-foot tall wooden Indian that he had carved, and like a Native American chief. It was really a nice carving. But I've never met Steve either. A young man, Dave Roush, I think he was probably about a year younger than me, carved. And back in those days, hill caricatures were very popular. And so lots of us carved those hillbillies. So you can see I'm closing in on finishing up on this guy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some buttons on him. So I'm taking a chisel that's kind of a deep but not very wide. That's basically about a half circle. And I'll do that in both directions, which will outline the buttons which hold the galluses or the straps on Andy's breeches. Then I'm going to remove just a little bit of wood right up to the buttons so that they tend to stand out more. And just a little bit of some careful knife work. This knife is one that I made from a power hacksaw blade, if I recall. Most of my tools I bought back in the 70s. Spent a little bit of time looking at wood carving tools the other day online, and my goodness, they've gotten expensive. So there we have, basically he's finished carving, and there's a little spot there on his hat that I need to finish. Right there. And that's pretty much a finished carving. So all you got left to do is put a finish on him and sign the back of him. Folks always like it when you sign your pieces. Sometimes I date them, sometimes I don't. But so there you have a finished Raggedy Andy Christmas ornament. And after I paint him up, that's what they look like. Hope you have fun trying this.